Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new season of the Eastchester Union Free School District podcast. We have raised the game to new heights, as you can see. First, I would like to introduce our newest superintendent, Dr. Villanueva.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Please, thank you so much for being here. And before we start and before I introduce our incredible guest today, I do have to just give some special thank yous. First, to the tech department here in Eastchester. Rob is right there. You can't see him, so I have to thank Rob to the camera. Rob Jacoby, thank you so much for everything that you do to make this possible. It does not go unnoticed in the entire tech team. Thank you to Mike Goldstein, who has produced this podcast with us. You have also made this podcast come to life. Thank you so much. And Nick Sochan, who is working the sound. Again, you can't see Nick, but I can see him, and he's doing a lot of work to make this possible. So thank you all so much for your efforts. Obviously, building administrators and the facilities department as well. Michael Smith, thank you as well. Michael Smith, another person who's also off camera, but does incredible work. With that said, we are going to go into this now. Our incredible guest, Marc Brackett. Welcome to the Eastchester Union Free School District podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And what's so exciting about this podcast today, I just want to say, is that we actually are filming in front of a live audience. And we are filming from people all around the world today, particularly Hong Kong. So this is going to be so exciting. So Marc, welcome.
Thank you.
My first question for you, Marc, would be your book. Where did the inspiration come from to put this down on paper and share this with the world?
You're referring to the Dealing with Feeling book?
Yes, your book, Dealing with Feeling.
Yeah. Well, I think, interestingly enough, I wrote a book prior to this book called Permission to Feel, and it had been out for about a year only and was translated into many languages and lots of success with it, which was very gratifying. But then I was getting emails from people saying like, well, Marc, thank you for giving me permission to feel, but there's a pandemic. There's like all these challenges with our society. Like, what the heck am I supposed to do with all these feelings? And that, among kind of personal reasons of my own struggles with dealing with emotions, motivated me to start writing this book.
Wonderful. That's probably the best feedback you can get when you put out a book and then people want so much more.
It's nice.
Sure, of course.
Bill, I don't know if you find this, Bill, but Marc, when we read your books, whether it was Permission to Feel or Dealing with Feelings, you seem to be able to bridge that ivory tower and the classroom. Mm-hmm. So many times do we read professional texts that are theoretical in nature, but when you're in the classroom, rolling up your sleeves and working with students and families, sometimes there's a disconnect. So you seem to be able to touch both of those points. How are you able to do that?
I'll be honest with you, I do a little bit of cheating, which is that I feel like I'm a much better presenter than I am writer. And so I record my presentations, and it gives me inspiration for how I write. And so it gives me, I don't have the patience. I have a bit of my own attention challenges. And so like sitting down, like writing out a whole story just feels so taxing for me. But I get up on stage and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And so then I can record that, and then I can make that into, I use that to help me write.
That's great.
Amazing. On that note, when people read this book, what do you want people to really take away from it? Is there kind of a core theme that you want parents, educators, or students of whatnot to really take from what you've written? Or is it kind of different for each person depending on who you are?
I think I have two primary goals. One is that emotion regulation is probably the most important skill that you can ever develop because it helps you across every aspect of life. Learning, decision-making, relationships, health, performance. I'm kind of a broken record about that. And then the second, which is really important, is that it's 100% learned. That means we can cultivate these skills as long as we put some dedication to it.
Amazing. And you see the progress from your book, and you see the progress in real time with people embracing what you're saying more about not emotionally reacting all the time. I mean, can you talk to some of the results that you've seen?
Sure. I think, R.U.L.E.R, which is our school-based program, we're now in 5,000 schools across the United States and in other countries. We're in 33 different countries. And I think that shows you there's a universal appeal for this.
Sure.
In this book club that I started, I just analyzed the data about who signed up for it. People from 42 countries signed up to attend this Dealing with Feeling book club. I was blown away by it. I mean, all over the world. And so there seems to be a universal interest in cultivating emotional intelligence.
Yeah. I have a story for you, and I will tell you. I want to get through everything we have to get with you, but what you just said really made me remember something so profound that is exactly what you're saying.
Well, everybody's going to want to know what it is now.
All right, now I got to say, well, yeah,
Now we gotta hear it.
I guess I have to say it now. So I had a screenwriting teacher who, when we first took the class, he was asking us, what is the most fundamental, basic, universal language that you need to communicate and what everyone's trying to communicate? And we all got the answers wrong. And by the end, he said, your feelings, your emotions. And that is the one universal language that we all speak. So that's exactly what you just said.
I think when you say the word universal, and the fact that you have 42 countries represented and just signing up for that book club, no matter how different the culture is, no matter what schooling looks like where you are, as educators, we bump into the same experiences. You wrote something in the very first portion of your book about just a quick little snippet about two boys or two students who got into it. One was a bully and one was perhaps the victim. And after all was said and done, there was consequences laid out, but the bully probably went home, didn't know what to do with the rest of his feelings. And the student who was the victim went home and probably didn't know what to do with the rest of their feelings either. And that happens so often in schools. And so when you talk about just naming it to tame it or across 42 countries, it doesn't matter what language you're speaking, the feelings still feel the same. So how did you come up with all the little anecdotes in the stories?
That's interesting. I mean, I'm out in the world a lot and I listen, and they're all real stories. They're, I make up the names because I don't want to exploit everybody that I live with and work with. It's sometimes like, I know that you changed the gender of that person, but that's really about me. I'm like, oh, maybe. I'm always listening for things that resonate around the work, and either it's me supporting someone and dealing with their feelings or someone supporting me, or just overhearing a conversation on a train where, a parent is screaming at their kid and, how the kid is reacting to it. And so, I like to be in the real world.
Amazing.
If I could add
Please.
to that, I mean, I think what's interesting too about dealing with feelings is this idea you talk about our failure to teach proactively feelings. And I think in many ways, you're looking to reframe this relationship. We often have to manage uncomfortable feelings or disruptive feelings within the classroom. But I love this idea of how we proactively cultivate these healthier feelings or these feelings of wellness. When you think about that sort of reframing, and you think about it both at the level of students, I actually think it might be easier with students. How do we do this with the adults, the ones who have a default setting that's been running for decades and are basically the students are tuning off of their emotional frequency each and every day? Like, what do you find works with adults in terms of the workshops you've run, the professional development? How does that get addressed in that?
I think there's a number of ways in. One is just asking people, like, how's your life going for you? What are you struggling with? And most people are struggling with something, whether it's their own loneliness or their anxiety or their frustration, or it's interpersonal, like with someone else, or it's their classroom management or time off tasks, or they'll complain that the students, are not regulated. That's a big one. Obviously that, I can't teach anymore. I'm spending so much time off task because kids, I'm constantly dealing with, emotional issues. And I say, well, how would you feel if I were able to teach you things that would make that easier? And then there it begins. So I just think you have to find your way in. What I've learned over the last 30 years of running around the world doing this, some people, they like the stories that I tell. They just love the stories. They're like, oh my gosh, thank you for sharing your vulnerability. some people roll their eyes when I'm vulnerable. And they're like, well, I've had fathers say to me things like, I don't know about you. You're like, that's nuts. You are so vulnerable. I would never be that way. That's just not my personality. No one's going to ever see me tell these stories like you tell them. And I say, I understand that. How about what the research shows about emotions and decision making? Have you read that? Do you know about that? And then all of a sudden, people start getting interested in the work. So I find that you have to be creative with helping people find their why.
Yeah. No, it's very powerful, right? You always want to just meet people with where they're at, and yeah, I'm sure you see that on the daily because everyone's at a different place. And
Everyone's at a different place. One thing I can tell you that in the schoolwork, I have not found very much any age differences. So people always think older people are more set in their ways than younger people. We have not really found that.
interesting.
What we have found is that the age of the students you teach does impact your willingness to do the work, such that high school teachers tend to be less motivated to do this kind of work than middle school, than elementary, than preschool.
Interesting. That takes me back to actually when you said you had a conversation with a father. There's an anecdote that you write in here about the parent and the 16-year-old rolling their eyes at them, and you feel that moment of just your blood pressure rising, and you take that meta moment. I say this because I have children around that same age. And then you talk about parents also having the responsibility to raise their children as well, but also wanting to do it the way they want to do it, and then also being an adult in VUCAville. So the adult and VUCA, what does that stand for? VUCA, the violent.
No, not violent.
Not violent.
Volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and something the A I have to think of. But
I totally put you on the spot.
That's okay.
Yes, but it was VUCAville. So even the adult themselves is in this kind of dysregulated environment around them, and then they have to be their best selves with their parent, as a parent with their child. That moment of that meta moment. How do you yourself make sure that you're spending enough time in that meta moment before you actually go to respond? You have the feeling, you have the emotion, and now you have to respond. How long do you stay there?
That's a great question. Well, it depends on the situation, obviously, and sometimes I'm terrible at the meta moment. I mean, to be frank, I'll even sometimes know, I'm like, Mark, this is your technique. You've been teaching it for 25 years, and who cares? Just go for it. Just say what's on your mind, because this is beyond the meta moment. It is hard work. And I think just we acknowledge that. And by the way, what I want to say about that is that's where emotion regulation comes in handy afterwards, which is, do you have the emotional bandwidth to apologize, to ask for forgiveness, to share how you're not your strategy for not replicating that poor behavior, and how you're going to move on. The big thing with apologies is that we often say, but, I'm sorry, but you really, but you said this, but after the but, we know that the apology no longer has any meaning. And so it's really about you saying, I was not the best version of myself, and I don't like that about myself, and I'm going to really work hard, no matter what the situation is, to show up with my best self.
Right.
With that said, I think the space between stimulus and response, this is, taken from Viktor Frankl's quote about, and he was a psychologist
Man's
living
search
in,
for meaning.
correct. He was a psychologist, in the Holocaust, a survivor, thank goodness. And he said, between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. And so the meta moment, right, that you're triggered, you're activated. It could be anything, by the way. It could be something someone said. It could be a thought in your head. And then you're going to go for your typical automatic, usually unhelpful reaction. And so the meta moment says, no, we're not going to do that. That has not led to great outcomes for me or my people. So what I want to do is build the space with the breath or the pause, and then think about my best self. Now, that takes time and effort. What I'll say about that is that most people will say, well, I tried it and it didn't work. And I'll say, me too. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means it didn't work in that one attempt.
That time.
The second thing I'll say is that it's way better to be proactive about it. So I joke about the opening story in my book is about the story with my mother-in-law who moved in with us unexpectedly during the pandemic and, it got really difficult. I didn't take the meta moment when we got into our big fight. I failed. But I did go to bed that night and I said, Mark, you got to make a commitment to being the better you. And the way I really did that was whenever I'd leave the house and come back, before I would enter in, because the way my house was, we entered into our kitchen, and she would always be in the kitchen. She lived in the kitchen. And so if I wanted a cup of coffee or a snack, there was my mother-in-law every single day, all day long. And so I just vowed before I entered the door to be the best son-in-law self. And I call that a proactive meta moment,
Right.
such that I'm anticipating I'm going to get
Right.
triggered or activated, and I'm going to bring the version of my best self forward so that I'm applying that as I enter into the situation.
It's great. And there was even a physical threshold that you were passing.
Correct.
Yeah. It's great.
Well, with all of this, and these techniques are groundbreaking, how did R.U.L.E.R develop over time as you were developing it with the meta moment, with all of these techniques that you have discovered and are putting out there?
So R.U.L.E.R started off as a classroom middle school curriculum. For the first 5 years of its existence, maybe 7 years, it was my uncle, who was from New York State in the Catskill Mountains, who was writing a curriculum back in the 70s and 80s to teach kids emotional intelligence through language arts and social studies, who became, my hero. And when I decided this was going to be my career, I pulled him out of retirement, and we spent 5 years trying to write this curriculum, which was a disaster. I was like 25, and my uncle was 65, so we had 40 years difference. He's like, well, let's go have a decaf in Dunkin' Donuts and write. I'm like, not sure that's what I should be doing at 25 years old, Uncle Marvin, but I did it. And so we wrote this curriculum for 5 years. Interestingly enough, I don't think I've ever shared this publicly. As I was derailed, I was told not to do it when I was in graduate school.
Really?
Yeah, they said, you really can't teach this stuff.
Wow.
And so this is an intelligence. An intelligence, the teacher, the professor I was studying with was not of the Carol Dweck growth mindset nature. He was of the fixed mindset nature. And he said, I think this is going to be a waste of your time. And I don't even approve you doing this for your dissertation and your thesis. So I had to do R.U.L.E.R on the side.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't make it my career as a graduate student. He has since apologized many times. But
read the book.
Yeah.
He's read the book. He's a good friend, and he's very smart. He just, came from a different perspective, a different, way of thinking. Anyhow, that was the beginning of it. And then we failed terribly, because here was Uncle Marvin and Mark. I was now 30 and he was 70. We're running around schools and trying to get people to talk about their feelings. And it was just endless resistance. My job is not to talk about feelings. I want to talk about joy and jolly. I'm not going to talk about anxiety or despair. And so it was at that point when I realized that, there were very few Uncle Marvins. That there were very few people who were ready to do this work and inspired and, wanting to teach emotions. Yeah. So what we had to do was we had to work with the educators. We had to figure out a way to reach them. And so we started developing more people joined the team got bigger, and we started thinking about what is the role of the teacher in teaching kids emotional intelligence, but their own personal and professional development. We had more success there, but still problems, because principals would invite us to the schools, and they'd say, welcome, Mark and Uncle Marvin, and go do this great training, and everyone, I hope you enjoy it, and the principal would leave. And then at lunch, I'd get a message, a teacher would come up to me and say things like, my principal is a jerk. Or something really it was like, yikes. It was so I knew.
It was a handwritten note.
Yeah, pretty much. I knew it wasn't going to work. There would be no sustainability. We were wasting our time because the leader didn't believe and provide the supports, it wasn't going to happen. And then it just worked its way up to then district level leaders. I got invited to give a speech in New York City. I met the chancellor of New York City's public schools, and she's like, I want this in all our schools. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. But yet we worked together in a number of the big districts, and we rolled it out in hundreds and hundreds of schools across New York City. And so it's just evolved over time from like a classroom program to a systemic approach to leaders, teachers, students, and families.
Incredible. And on that note, what have you seen now that this is everywhere? What distinguishes the success? What distinguishes the districts that have a lot of success with this and the ones that kind of struggle with it? What can you just?
So I'm going to ask you a favor. Can you look to your right? And can you look diagonally across? This is it. You know,
I can attest to that.
I'll verbalize that now so people who are
Please.
listening know what the heck we're talking about. But it is the leadership's commitment.
Amazing.
Because these, unfortunately, social and emotional learning is still an add-on. It is not part of the standardized curriculum in our education system, meaning that you have a director of instruction. You're that person. Yeah. So like you have state level requirements for language arts, math, other subject areas. There is no state level requirement for social and emotional learning yet. Have that growth mindset there. And because of that, if there's not someone like Bill leading it and supporting it, it just won't happen.
Yeah.
It will disappear. When he disappears, it will disappear because there's no plan for long-term implementation.
Why is that? Because I have a lot of opinions as to why that is. I feel that, obviously feelings get overlooked. I think it's very hard to perceive them. I think it's very hard to, you've been able to chart them and give people a guideline and direction. But why is that a thing?
Well, I think it goes back to history that emotions were always seen as, like when you talk about emotions, it's when you're emotional, and that's disruptive. And so we're just not going to integrate it. We're not going to talk about that. Also, in schools, what gets measured gets taught, all that kind of stuff. And so one thing I feel very strongly about is I don't want a child to get a report card for their emotional intelligence. I want this to be completely formative.
That is certainly a conversation that has cropped up in many a circle for educators and leaders. Do we put this on the report card? How do we evaluate this? Do we put it on a rubric? And I thought, boy, that seems counterintuitive.
I think you can create rubrics for, needs to develop this, the way I think about it is that there are these skills like R.U.L.E.R. And it's life's work to get good at them. And so, for example, when we measure emotion regulation, it's not like a correct or incorrect.
Right.
That's the problem. There is no correct or incorrect because, what works for me might make you anxious. And so I can't decide that's the right answer. But what we can do is show from the research what are the different buckets, like in my book, of emotion regulation skills, and just see our kids making progress towards developing capacity in those buckets. That, to me, should be talked about.
Gotcha.
I think the title of one of your presentations says the new or emotional regulation is the new success.
Yeah.
And, we're very reductively, I'll share that we're typically taught you get good grades in school, you get into a good university, then you get a good job. But if emotional regulation is the new success, I remember a saying that I had seen go back and forth with two people, very, very successful gentlemen, financially very successful, just everything very successful. And somebody said to him, why don't you have a life coach? It was talk about life coaches. And I said, I don't need a life coach. Look at how successful I am. I'm so accomplished. And the man just simply said to him, well, imagine how much more successful you'd be if you had a life coach. And so when I think of if emotional regulation is the new success, we should be putting all of our eggs into that basket because then by way of grades should come, success should come, opportunities should arrive at our feet, and those access points should open up to us. Is that what you mean by emotional regulation is the new definition of success?
I mean, you're making it even bigger than I thought it was. But I do think it's important. And I think another example I have is gave a speech at a Fortune 100 company, and the CEO did something very similar. Like, look at me, Mark. Do I really need emotional intelligence? And I said, well, I just interviewed the 5 people who report to you, and they hate you. So maybe you do. I didn't say that. I'm joking. But I thought it. I really did think, and it was true.
Yeah.
Like the C-suite who reported to the CEO really did not like him.
not.
And, was he smart? Of course. You can't, you have to have some abilities to lead if you're in that kind of position. But I think your point is a well-taken one, which is, imagine if he was as smart as he is and as skillful he was, with whatever the topic area was, but also was great with people. How much harder the people who reported to him would work, and how much more motivated they would be to go to work, and how much more time they would spend, thinking creatively with him to bring the company to the next level.
Right.
They're probably not, making money gets you just, after people make a certain amount of money, they're kind of like done. And so I always use that as an example of, that it's the next level in terms of added value.
Right.
And on those notes, what can be done more with social emotional learning to really centralize it into the curriculum and whatnot? Because again, right, as you've said through some examples, how many people just perceive it as, oh, it's this extra thing, it's this add-on. What can district leaders do, more specifically to really incorporate it into all education?
Yeah, I think, with R.U.L.E.R, there are tools. So there is a charter, there's a mood meter, there's a meta moment, there's blueprint. And so does everybody know what those tools are? Does everyone have the language to describe those tools? Does every classroom have a charter? Does every school building have one for the faculty and staff? Those are easy metrics to, uphold. Like, check every year. We have 5 schools in our district. Are there charters for every school? Are classrooms doing this? Are grade levels doing it? What is the plan for every teacher that they're accountable for implementation? So, for example, are they revisiting the mood meter, across the year? Are they revisiting the meta moment across the year? We have a classroom curriculum. So there are about 12 feeling words that we think are like the right ones to teach for every grade level, let's say elementary level. Okay. There are units, and those units have different steps, like a step where you kind of introduce the concept, a step where you're infusing it into a subject area, like a character analysis, a step where they're talking about how to regulate and what are the strategies to deal with that feeling. So my point of sharing that is that there's more in that, but each unit has these different discrete lessons. Our expectation, our hope, is that you would do one of those about every 3 weeks. One unit every 3 weeks across the school year that gets integrated into your existing language arts or social studies curriculum. And so the question is, does the principal at the school make it clear that the expectation is that we're going to get through X number of units, in this work? And that way, it's all done in advance. So give you an example. Let's say that there's 12 words. Let's say there's 3 for each quadrant of the mood meter. That's the way it's designed. Is the planning committee, Bill's team, over the summer works with the elementary teachers who are working with kids and says, here's our 12 words that we want to make sure every kid graduates with this year from your grade level. Let's look at our existing curriculum in terms of when you're going to be teaching X, Y, and Z in your language arts and social studies. And let's be strategic about mapping these feelings to your existing curriculum. Oh, you're doing the Boston Tea Party. That's really great for the word enraged. Oh, you're doing nonviolent resistance. That's a great feeling word of contentment. And so you're literally taking your existing curriculum, taking the feeling words, mapping them out across the year, and then the teacher's job is very easy. They just know they have to address these words and do these extra little lessons to help kids build the emotion skills.
Very interesting. Yeah. And you've seen the results of that in real time, where when they build that vocabulary, wow. No, that's incredible. Actually, Dr. Meyer, I do want to ask you a question, because I've seen you in real time last year roll this out, because we made videos on it. We spoke about it a lot. Can you comment on if there was anything in the rollout from the position that you're in, and Dr. Villanueva, please comment on this as well, where, are there any things that you picked up on that could make it more effective in rolling out this to teachers? Maybe what's some of the feedback that you got back from teachers? How can this be a smoother process for districts to really digest?
Well, I think a big sort of eye-opening piece for us was space and time.
Okay.
So there's a little more space and time sometimes within the elementary school schedule for this. And I think that's probably speaks to the fact that those teachers feel that this is a value and do this almost intuitively. So this just made some of that work more transparent and gave them a language for it. What we didn't have, which became very evident, is there was no space and time at the high school. So any work of this nature was retrofitted on. And we were putting a great burden on the counselors to implement it or to make it pervasive in their conversations and their workshops, which honestly, that's not much bandwidth for it. So one of the big pieces is, as we rolled out this new schedule this year, was building out intentionally an advisory period, which is essentially creating a space for it.
Sure.
And I think that's the piece that we're always up against. Okay. And Mark had referenced sort of the regulations or expectations or measurables within the state of New York. And I think, someone once said, a doctor actually, like doctors are very good at adding things, but sometimes struggle with taking things off. So you just keep getting more medication as you get older. And it's like this cake of medication or medicine. And I think that happens in education. And we don't often revisit, okay, what have we outgrown? What are we ready to let go of? What no longer serves us so we can make space for this work? And for us here at Eastchester, the schedule, particularly at the secondary level, was a reflection of so many things. And the shift, and just today to have literally the whole school together in an assembly was something we couldn't have imagined. Like we didn't have that within the space. So that changes the landscape for the work. And I think that's what gives it viability. I also think an important piece, and I'd love to hear Mark's thoughts on this. I mean, the emotional regulation component, it's not that you are just flatlining emotionally, which I think is what some people perceive. Like, I kind of like getting passionate about things. I kind of like getting upset. I feel alive in those moments. And maybe you could speak to the misperceptions around the idea of the word regulation as it relates to emotions, and it's sort of how you would frame that.
Sure. Well, I think importantly, emotion regulation is about learning how to use all emotions wisely to achieve a goal. It's not about down-regulating only. It's not about up-regulating only. So if your goal, to, be the best football player is to pump yourself up and get that adrenaline going and push yourself to feel like, like really kind of in that heightened arousal, but like kind of with some passion, that's great because that's what's going to help you win the game. That's not the same place you probably want to be, when you're celebrating a party or when you are, trying to read at night or when you're trying to write a poem that's very deep and moving about your feelings. And so the point of emotion regulation is that you're trying to find the techniques and strategies to get you to the place where your emotions are going to best serve you. So when you're regulating emotions, you're not necessarily not feeling anymore. Sometimes you're just living with the feeling, like, okay. So because I'm sharing, I experience anxiety a lot. Sometimes it's very strong and I have to down-regulate it. And I have to say, Mark, like you are spiraling and this is not going to be helpful. You need to call a friend or take your breaths or do some, compassionate self-talk. But most of the time I just notice it and I'm like, oh, you're here today. Hi. And I just say, well, good to see you. And then it goes. And so we don't want to attach to the emotions either. And it's not that anxiety, this is where, there's a school that's not too far from here that was in a newspaper because after the last election, they were going to give kids the day off because they thought that, oh my gosh, these kids are going to be feeling very strong emotions. And I was about 10 seconds away from writing an op-ed about this saying, this is exactly what not to do. you have to be uncomfortable. Life is about being uncomfortable. People are going to say things to you that are going to hurt. And sometimes you're not going to do a good job and you're going to get harsh feedback. Some people are not going to be emotionally intelligent in the world around you. And so to prevent people from experiencing unpleasant emotions is crazy to me. It's the antithesis of what emotional intelligence is all about. Discomfort is fabulous. Torture is not. And so it's not torturous to make a kid go to school because they're unhappy with something. You know, I always say, like, I've had anxiety for 56 years. I've never missed a day of work because of it. Now, granted, I don't have an anxiety disorder per se, and I respect that some people do need much more support than I have needed. But nevertheless, I think it's the framework for emotion regulation is specifically the thoughts and actions that we use to prevent, reduce, initiate, maintain, or enhance emotions. So prevent unwanted emotions, reduce difficult emotions, initiate the emotions, which is a fun piece to regulation. It's saying, oh, I need to pump myself up, or I need to, as a teacher, create an emotion of inspiration in my class right now because I want my kids to be really excited about this lesson.
Right.
That's regulation.
Yeah.
It's maintenance of emotion, meaning I'm having a great day and people are kind of like, you know, for me, for example, I very rarely take a whole day off, which I need to do more often. But if I'm in flow with my writing, I have to make a really, really big rule to not check email or my phone. I have addiction to email and my phone. And so I'm in a flow state, and then I'll get a little stuck and I'll be, oh, let me check the phone. It's the worst thing I can do because it brings me out of my flow zone. And so my emotion maintenance strategy is preparing myself. And sometimes now I just leave it. It's very painful, but I'll leave my phone in another room.
Yeah.
And so, do you see emotion regulation is kind of,
Yeah.
it's not just about like stress management.
No.
Yeah,
It's really about using your emotional life wisely to attain the goals that you want in your life.
Amen.
I am so happy you are here because everything that you are saying is just completely on point, and I cannot tell you how much I feel so strongly about what you're saying. And
Regulate.
We'll regulate, and as you know, someone who has been a student and wasn't so far away from being in those shoes, and my life's work has been so much involved in everything that you're talking about. To hear this being mainstreamed it truly is the future of education, but also of humanity. So, and I've seen that firsthand. So I cannot tell you how big of a fan you have in me right now.
Just want to
please.
I have been the keeper of time all day, so I want to be mindful as we
yes.
start.
Can I ask a couple
The
last questions?
podcast that will and you're not going to go to bed tonight because the podcast is not.
It's still going.
Yes.
It's not over until everybody can regulate their emotions.
Bill, we'll start with you.
Or fall asleep.
Right.
So doing this, and so when I was in school, this was nowhere near the forefront.
Joe went to Eastchester.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
I'm an alumni of
Alumni.
Eastchester
Oh,
High
cool.
School.
Yeah.
And also, to preface, just for context, not as a plug, but I've been an artist and actor my entire life. So my life's work has been with regulating my emotions and whatnot, with all the techniques. I went to school where, guess what? We're in a chair, we're relaxing, and now you need to do an affective memory. You're going to a dramatic place. We need to see the result of you
Exactly.
crying. Yes. So this is everything that I've been lucky enough to experience. This was not at the forefront of education when I was here, and it wasn't so long ago. What are some of the obstacles? Let me give you one specific example that I can see people saying to you, and you did touch on it a little bit where, and I love what you said, where what's going to be taught is what's going to be measured. You know, a lot of people might say, oh, well, this is an academic setting. Where is the room for this within academics? Where is the room for this, you know? And again, right, this is a lot of what you said with the CEO. Well, I'm worth this much. This is my net worth. Why do I need this? I do see a lot of, and I'm speculating, but I can see a lot of, conflicts with, academic objectives compared to, feeling and whatnot. So what would you say your experience is with that, and how can the social emotional learning, how can the social emotional learning be at the forefront as well without losing the measurement or academic argument?
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things, and this, I'll be a little provocative here. My hunch is that there is a portion of the academic curriculum that's a waste of time, just to be blunt. That not everything that we're teaching now
I felt
is
so strongly that way as a student. I'm not going to go into detail.
now, and
but
that may
I
be
just-
that may be like, oh, I hate Mark now, but I do feel strongly about that. So much of what we've learned is about memorizing things that are not that useful for our lives, and so I just want to put that out there. The second is that without the skills of emotion regulation, we're not going to be as present as we can be. We're not going to be the best possible learners. I do believe the field was built upon academic integration. I don't feel that's the only way it should be done. I believe that these skills are so important that I'm thrilled that the high school has an advisory period that's dedicated to teaching these discrete skills. Because weaving them into the curriculum is a great way to begin the learning. It's a great way to, empathize with characters and learn the language. But you need real practice regulating your emotions. And you need someone to help you think through your situations, not the character in the book situations, but like, who are you struggling with right now? Who at the school, is not making your life as pleasant as it could be? What can you do about that? What can I do to help you with that? Can you try that and come back to me and let me know how that worked? And if that didn't work, let's try again. Do you follow? Like that's a discrete personal journey of developing a skill. And so what I would argue is that in the ideal scenarios, we would have academic integration and also opportunities for the actual personal skill development.
So in other words, it's not taking away from any academic success, and if anything, it would enhance it.
Yeah, but remember, I have a new definition of success.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
and not that I can make this like I have now, but because I think that the portrait of a graduate should include a graduate who has the skills of emotion regulation.
That is a big conversation for us in the state of New York. It sure is right now.
And, honestly, my math scores, my science scores, my language arts scores did not get me my job at Yale. It didn't help me get tenure either. Yes, my cognitive abilities, I had to do the work, write the grants, write the papers, blah, 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 important. But the fundraising is all about emotion regulation. It's all about working with people and finding out, how to kind of connect with people. We're not taught that piece. And that is, I think, the missing piece in education.
Wow.
I am sensitive to the time just because our guests also need to depart by
Yes.
3.
I was going to ask the both of you. Is that all we got? All right, because this could go on for another 5
can feel
hours.
it,
Yeah. Well, Mark, you have to come back at some point.
I have nothing else to say.
I'm sure that's not the case. I'm sure you have a lot more to say. But Mark, first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
today.
you.
This is an absolute treat.
For me, this is, I'm glad my team was here today too, to get to see a district that has such commitment to this work, because it makes a difference. And just to be frank, it makes us want to work more with you and to really support you in doing it and becoming that kind of flagship spotlight district, so that people from around the world can come visit you and be in awe of what you're doing to make kids' lives better.
That's wonderful.
You're spearheading that, so thank you so much for doing that. And thank you so much for commenting on the district, because Dr. Meyer, Dr. Villanueva, what the two of you are doing to make this district like that. Again, I wish that this was so much more on the forefront when I was in high school. And the students, the parents, the community, they're very, very lucky to have the two of you spearheading this. And Mark, yes, they're very lucky to have you here today. And
And we're all lucky to have each other.
yes, that's true. Absolutely, to learn and grow. And yes, I'm going to stop talking because this can go so much longer. But I will do my due diligence for the audience. Maybe we'll have a director's cut in the future. I don't know. But on that note, Eastchester, thank you so much for tuning in to, again, our newly elevated podcast. And we will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much.
Yay.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Great shout out.